Rex Heuermann and James Burke. Who's James Burke? Remember James Burke? James Burke was the former Suffolk County police chief that had a lot of accusations against him and a lot of charges against him as well. And he went to prison for some time for those charges. But questions still remain when we look back at the story of Rex Heuermann and the many, many years of his alleged terror, if you will, with sex workers near Gilgo Beach and the supposed alleged frequenting of these same sorts of individuals by James Burke, who had a lot of power. We're going to talk about that. Joining me to discuss, Shavaun Scott, psychotherapist and author. This is something where we don't have a lot of physical evidence anymore because time has obviously passed, but there's certainly a lot of questions that connect possibly James Burke to Rex Heuermann. When investigators they're still combing through this. We don't know. I don't think it's the end of the day yet for James Burke in terms of charges. That's just my speculation. But how do we go back and look at some of the facts that we know about the two individuals and maybe try and connect some dots? Are there ways beyond just physical evidence to look at the profile of these two individuals and some of their actions and maybe find out more of what James may have been involved in or not involved in at that point in time where Rex was running loose, allegedly?
Yeah, I think it's hard, when you're doing this kind of historical analysis, but that's what investigators do. And you
Hmm.
can get good investigators who go back and look for people, outside of the ones that have talked already and look for other people who may be willing to talk. And the more you get, the more you can start to connect the dots and possibly come up with something, of evidential value. The thing that just everything about James Burke is shocking and disgusting, and it makes us wonder again, who can we trust in law enforcement? It's
Hmm.
it's shocking, and the thing that just, of course, kicked me in the gut was interest in snuff films,
Yeah,
which apparently came from two sources, and that, of course, is so horrendous. We can't help but think of Heuermann.
it really makes you wonder. I mean, we're talking two people in the same geographic area. Um, you want to think there's not a ton of people into these sort of things, but
Mm.
there's certainly a handful at the very least. And they seem to, kind of run in some of the same circles if
They
they're
do.
not just keeping to themselves. And unfortunately, a lot of them do not keep to themselves. There's been
Yeah.
allegations that have been made by people claiming that way back in the day, two of them were at a party together. It was a claim. It was a claim that was made by a woman who was a sex worker. And it's one of those things where society doesn't want to really believe individuals that have that as their line of work, if you will. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're lying by any stretch of the imagination. How do you dig deeper into that to determine the validity of such a statement?
People tend to not want to believe the worst about law enforcement, and they tend to not trust sex workers.
Hmm.
So I think, again, it's kind of an in-depth interview. Does the person seem cogent? Do they seem clear? Do they seem logical? And can they list specifics?
Hmm.
And can they give a consistent story over time? Because people who are telling stories, as I've said before, they contradict themselves, if you do multiple interviews. And I think you're looking for consistency, you're looking for collateral information. Does it all add up? And can you find more people who would be willing to come forward and talk about it?
Obviously, Burke is not in any sort of power anymore. Just has a really horrible record behind him and doesn't really speak publicly. It's understandable why. But you look back at his track record, the civil rights violation that he was charged with. Someone, if for people who don't know, someone stole a duffel bag out of his trunk, and in that duffel bag was sex toys, pornography, allegedly snuff film, and many other things that were connected. Um, Obstructing justice, he allegedly, beat up the guy, handcuffed him,
Yeah.
and beat him, and instructed others to not talk about it. So not in power, but he was within a structure where there was others willing to go basically to bat for him and say, "Yep, don't know anything about this. Um, that's not an easy thing to remove out of a system, just because the leader is gone. And we're talking, it's been several years now since he's been removed, but you know, we're talking the years where the investigation should have been going on and wasn't necessarily going on. How do we know that there's still not some folks in there that may be helping to still cover this sort of thing up?
Yeah, I think it's a logical assessment to assume if this guy got away with any of that behavior
Hmm.
for any period of time, that there were enablers there. And I would be looking really closely at, doing an investigation, higher authority looking at this department and really trying to take apart with in-depth interviews and in-depth looking at history and looking at other questionable things that happened and trying to determine the full extent of I don't know. I was going to say corruption. It's worse than corruption. I don't know
Hmm.
what the right word would be, but
Yeah, I mean, it's
it's bad.
complicity to
Yeah.
a crime. I mean, just to
Yeah.
horrible behavior. And what's interesting about it is you go, okay. I mean, I've been in workplaces where there's been bad behavior, and I've been the first sometimes to raise my hand and go to HR and be like, we got to look at this over here.
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't. I mean, and sometimes it's just as simple as I don't want to lose my job, and I
Yes.
get that, but when we're talking like the level of depravity in some of these situations, if you're not willing to go and speak up and say something, I mean, is that a logical answer of saying I don't want to lose my job, so that's why I'm not going to talk about something, this horrendous?
Yeah. No, I have, when I worked in the government system, in years past, various places, I was always the one raising my hand and saying, this is not okay.
Hmm.
This is not cool. And it does shake the system up. And sometimes, it means you end up leaving the job when you're not listened to. But we need to know we can trust the police. We
Hmm.
need to know that. And we've got to hold them to the highest ethical standards and not tolerate this kind of stuff. And so I think the allegations mean let's take it really seriously and investigate it.
Be very interesting as this all continues to unfold. Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Brueski, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.